League One needs an international break. We've seen over the course of the last few seasons where international breaks in League One have caused an abundance of postponements and abandoned games, and this isn't good for the EFL League One and it isn't good for English football. We already know that international breaks obviously see a turn of fans go to different clubs and things like that, but now we're seeing League One teams not even have games due to the amount of international call-ups from one team or both. And for me, I think it is time for the EFL to take some notice and to make something happen with EFL League One. I think the right thing to do would to be create an international break for that division. Now, we know it isn't that difficult. It happens in the Premier League. It happens in the Championship. It's pretty much happening in League One already, as I'm sure some of you League One fans may already know. And I think this weekend there's only 2 games being played, which I previewed a couple of days ago. And for me, I think it's time for a change. Now, if you have not done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and turn on that notification bell to stay tuned for all of my latest EFL, League One and Championship content coming to the channel over the course of the next few weeks and months. You will see down on the ticker below all my other channels and social medias. Make sure you go ahead and follow me over there as well. So, when we're talking about international breaks, and I'm not saying that these teams should play less games or anything like that. I think the 46-game season for the EFL is absolutely perfect. But I do believe that when you've got essentially, I think it's 10 postponements this weekend for League One games, I think why not just give everybody the week off? I think it was the same a few months ago with the September international break, and I just think it's time for the EFL and English football to take notice. I think we've seen over the course of, in my opinion, probably the last few years, because Derby County were in the last 2 years in League One, and I believe we only played like 1 or 2 games during an international break over the course of those seasons. Obviously, we did play through the Euros, but was it the Euros, World Cup, whichever one it was that was around Christmas time? But the major problem that happened with Derby was sometimes we'd have 3 or 4 players called up of our own. Now, our squad was big enough on occasion that we still played because we wasn't missing key players in a sense. But it's one of those for me where you look at the likes of Birmingham City, you look at some of the other teams that have got some of their most important players being called up, which is resulting in games being called off and things like that. And I do agree with games being postponed for having 3 or more international call-ups, but I do think that the league should probably look at it. I think the EFL as a whole, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily do their job correctly on a large majority. I think what we see with the EFL when we're looking at international breaks is the top teams get them, and obviously the Premier League as well. The top teams get them, but when it comes to the lower divisions, you've got those... they obviously don't get the games in hand and things like that other teams get because of other things, and I think sometimes it can be quite hard to follow along. I think if you go to Derby last season, for example, with something like 5 games left to go, Derby County had 5 to go, and I think Peterborough had 8, I think Bolton had 7, Barnsley had 8 as well at one point, and that was because we'd played through a couple of the international breaks, and we'd obviously not had games postponed and things like that. And for me, I think it then makes it, as a fan, it's really difficult to sort of be able to follow along with the... If you have not done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and turn on that notification bell to stay tuned for all of my latest EFL content heading to this channel. I also follow along with Derby County on a daily basis, so go and check out that channel as well, and I'll catch you in my next video. With the storyline of a season, because you've got these teams that have played games less and games more, and I understand postponements and things like that, that's fine. Games being rescheduled, that's fine. But for me, I think when it's because of an international break, I think the fairest thing to do for all the teams is, for me, just give everyone an international break, because then you've got teams like Crawley who are playing through this one. They'll have more minutes in their legs, which isn't necessarily a bad thing when it comes to momentum, but when it comes to the other teams where those players that aren't on international duty, they can train for 2 days, have 3 days off, come back in the next week refreshed and rejuvenated, and they go in to a game with a few days off, a little bit of rest in their legs. And I think it's time for these sort of things to be taken note of. In my opinion, I think there's too many international breaks anyway. I think there should be less international football. But because of what we have to deal with the international football side of things, I do think the right thing to do would be to refresh it and restart the way we do things in the EFL. I think League One is a perfect division to start with, where you bring in those international breaks for everybody. The Championship already has it. I think in the future, maybe even League Two will get it. I know there's international call-ups throughout the divisions, and the big conversation topic is always, how many can we get the game called off? And I don't necessarily agree with having games called off. I think it should just be a standard no football. Like, just cut it off, have no football during the international breaks for the EFL. And obviously that then opens the door for those non-league teams to get extra money and revenue from fans who still want to go and watch live football, because not everybody enjoys international football. And this is something which I think could be massive across the divisions, because I think that if you start giving all these teams this rest, and it's not just certain teams getting it, which realistically most of the time it benefits the better teams in the division, because they're the ones that are going to have the better players that are going to be getting the international call-ups. And for me, I just do think it is time for that discussion to be had. I think League One especially needs it. I'm not entirely sure about League Two. I've not really been following along, but I'm sure they pretty much still have a full flood of fixtures heading into this weekend. So it's one of them for me. I think it is really annoying when you go to look at the fixture list on a Monday morning and everyone's playing. You go and look on the Thursday and there's 2 games playing. And it is disappointing. It is one of those things which, like, the clubs can't do anything about. The teams can't do anything about it. They're not going to go and buy lesser quality players just so they don't have an international break. Now, some teams will stock up and have extra squad players so that during that international break they don't lose as much strength. But I think when you have those international players, they're international for a reason. They're most likely going to be playing for you, especially if they're a senior international. It's even worse when you've got a young player who's breaking into the first team or whatever and gets an under-21s call-up or an under-18s call-up or whatever it may be, and then gets dropped out the team because they go on international, and then they've got to work their way back in. I think it's counterintuitive for the whole division, really. And obviously some people might disagree with me, but I personally certainly believe that League One needs an international break. I think the EFL needs to look into it as quickly as possible, and I know some will agree, some will disagree, but I think at the moment the international breaks benefit the better teams in the division. The worst teams always end up playing through. You look at your Crawleys, your Shrewsburys, they're playing through. Obviously I know Peterborough and Rotherham was still on last time I checked, but they're pretty much the only 4 teams in the division that are playing, while those other group of teams get extra days rest and things like that. So obviously let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell. We're trying to hit 50 subscribers by Christmas, and I know that you can help me, so make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you in my next video.